Hey fellas, hope you guys doing great. In today's video we will see, what if Naruto got trained by Garp and ate the rarest Logia type Strom fruit? Huge shout out to Dart93 for this story. If you end up liking this video, please consider subscribe and like the video. So let's start the story. Vice Admiral Garp, why are you so persistent about this? If you showed this much drive when it came to your work, then you'd already make Admiral. Hell, maybe even take my job. Grumbled Fleet Admiral Kong, a muscular man with slightly graying dark hair that was arranged in a spiked mohawk as he sat in his office at Marineford, the HQ of the Marines. Garp, a tall, broad-chested man with dark hair and a matching goatee, shrugged while picking his nose absently. I'm just fine where I am. Fleet Admiral seems like too much hassle, to tell the truth. Besides, where's the fun in being locked up in here all the time? He exclaimed, making his superior grumble about him being right. And I want to take the kid and train him personally. He's already gonna be one hell of a Marine. I want to make him better. Kong couldn't argue with that. Anyone that was trained seriously by someone like Garp would be a force to be reckoned with. That is, if they survived the training. Looking down at the file on his desk, he looked at the name. It was a Marine Officers Academy file holding the information on one of their cadets, and like Garp said, the boy had some promise. His name was Naruto Uzumaki, the youngest cadet in Marine history, entering at the age of 13. The boy was now 14 and a model student from what the instructors wrote in their notes. And by youngest, they meant it. When enlisting with the Marines, most waited until they were older, usually around the age of 16 to 18. But this boy signed up 3 years earlier, something that would have held him back had it not been for Garp backing the boy. When asked, Garp admitted that he didn't even know who the boy was, but that he did it because of a fire he'd seen in the kid's eyes. Of course, it caused quite a stir when a 13-year-old arrived for basic training. They actually didn't even have his size and they had to have some special made. Most didn't expect the boy to last long. After all, the others had 3 or more years on him, but he surprised them. Like with all new recruits, they split them into units just like they'd been out in the real world and sent them to hell and back. Physical training was nothing to him. He breezed through it like he'd been training for years. The blonde was even at the top of his unit when it came to unarmed combat that they were taught, usually ending with quite a few bruised egos when the older recruits were beaten by the younger man. The same with swords too, but they noted that he was much better with knives. But when it came to guns, he could only do just enough to pass, which was fine seeing as there were many others who favored melee over long-range weapons due to similar reasons. Another surprise was his leadership skills. During teamwork exercises, their unit was usually broken into 4 squads with 1 squad leader each. Naruto showed natural leadership abilities, often leading his squad to victory when it came to competitions. The boy had impressed them, so much so that he'd been offered a place in the Officers' Academy here in Marineford after finishing basic training, where most were usually assigned to a ship or base. Kong leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. I've seen kids like him, so driven, you know that his drive could be his downfall. There's a point where motivation can go too far and push him to the breaking point. He mused before looking at Garp with a "don't freak with me" frown. I know that you've talked to him. You wouldn't consider apprenticing him otherwise. Why does he want to be a Marine? Garp turned serious, something rare for Kong to see from the man. He hasn't told anyone else, but years ago, his village was destroyed by pirates. Everything that he had was taken from him, friends, family, his home, everything, leaving him the only survivor. No one knows who did it, well, no one but him, and he refuses to say. I think it's because he wants to be the one to bring those responsible to justice. In the gym of the academy, Naruto Uzumaki passed the time by punching a punching bag that hung from chains on the ceiling next to the wall. Those around him, working out or just hanging out, ignored him as best they could while grimacing at the sight of the extremely heavy bag swinging as much as it did. Many of the females would call him cute, with his sun-kissed blonde hair and sky-blue eyes, especially the 3 scars on each side of his face that looked like whiskers. But they could see that he'd be an attractive man when he finished growing, and from the way he trained, he'd be built. When others used one, the thing would move a fraction of an inch while compressing in as not to break their hands, but he had the bottom of it hitting the wall every few punches. Naruto himself barely paid attention to what was going on around him, thinking back to that day when he lost it all. He once lived on a small island town that had been called Konoha, had been. All it was now is a mere husk, a broken shell, and the place where his family died. All he remembered was the sound of screaming and the voice of the man that had been his grandfather telling him to run, all before the deafening sound of a gunshot. It had all been as clear as day, the old gray-haired man known as Hiruzen Sarutobi looking at him, yelling to run, and then his body jerked. Naruto remembered screaming as the old man spat up blood, his eyes rolling back before falling to the ground with a pirate standing behind him. A face he'd never forget, one that'd forever be burned into his memory. "Cadet Uzumaki!" He stopped in mid-swing, letting the punching bag fall to meet his fist before looking over to see one of the instructors, dressed in a standard uniform of white and blue. "Yes?" he replied before grinning, as if he'd never been thinking those dark thoughts from before. "You are needed outside." Naruto raised an eyebrow at that, and went into the locker room to don his own uniform. It was a standard white short-sleeved shirt with a marine emblem, a simplified seagull with marine underneath it on the back with a blue neckerchief. His pants were simple dark blue trousers, and on his head he had a hat with marine across the front. He exited the gym and walked out onto the grounds of the academy only to find himself alone before everything went dark. Waking up a few seconds later, Naruto found himself laying in the grass and sat up while rubbing his head, where a giant knot was forming. What hit me?" he groaned before seeing a cannonball a few feet away. "That was lesson 1, a voice said from behind him, making him turn his head while still sitting on the ground, only to see Garp standing there with a grin and his arms behind his back. "Always be alert and how to dodge. But it looks like you need more training in that, so." Seeing the move his arms out from behind him, Naruto paled at the sight of him carrying 2 more while a large crate full of them were strapped to his back. "Time for a retest. Oh, and I almost forgot to tell you, you've been assigned to me as my new apprentice and given the rank of petty officer. Congratulations." Naruto blinked. Cool, thanks. I think." Garp's grin turned dark and Naruto paled. An hour later, Naruto found himself panting while Garp laughed thunderously and pat him on the back, each hit nearly knocking the air out of him. "You did good today, kid," the man told him loudly while ignoring the angry looks of those around him thanks to the cannonballs stuck in everything from homes to trees and roads. Looking at the out-of-breath teen, Garp couldn't help but smirk. "You'll be one hell of a Marine, kid, one hell of a Marine." 2 years later, Garp found himself asleep on his ship, snoring loudly underneath a cannon on the deck with the snot bubble expanding and contracting with each breath. They were stationed in Loungetown for the time being, not that it was an official order or anything. He just felt like stopping there for now. "Vice Admiral!" screamed one of his men as he ran out onto the deck, actually waking the man up and causing him to hit his head on the cannon above them, denting the cannon. "Huh!" he yawned out while rubbing his eye. "Sir, it's Ensign Uzumaki." Hearing the name of his apprentice, he became fully aware and looked at the man sharply, giving him his complete attention. "He's fighting someone, sir. No, he's killing him." "What?" "I don't know why, but we were patrolling and he suddenly tackled someone. Sir, on one can stop him. He's already knocked out 5 men that tried to pull him off of whoever that is." That was all Garp had to hear before he ran, jumping off the ship and to find Naruto. He did easily by following the sound of screaming people and found 3 squads of Marines trying to stop the blonde and pull him away from the person he'd been beating with little success. Pushing his way through the mob, he reared his fist back and slammed it into the back of the blonde's head, making him fall to the ground like a puppet without its strings. When he pulled the 16-year-old up off the ground, he nearly dropped him in shock. The man Naruto had been beating was torn up pretty badly, his eyes swelling, nose broken and bleeding, lips busted and also swollen. But despite the blood, bruises, and swelling, he recognized the face of a man he'd fought several times in the past but seemed to always fail at catching. He knew that Naruto would be great, but... "Alert HQ!" he called out to the Marines, never taking his eyes off the man below him. "Gol D, Roger has been taken into custody." Sitting in his jail cell deep underground, the man known as the King of Pirates sat on the floor of his cell in chains as he counted down the hours to his own execution. It had nearly been a year since his capture. In fact, It was only days away until it would officially be the 1-year anniversary of his capture at the hands of an ensign. He had been shipped off to Impel Down for the most part of the year, but now he was right back in Lougetown, his birth town, and ironically enough, the place where he'd be put to death. Garp had come by not too long ago, where he had told the Marine about his soon-to-be-born child and asked him to take care of it. He had enjoyed the little talk really. Garp, while still a Marine and his enemy, was a man of honor and would fulfill his request. Like Garp had said, any woman with ties to him would be killed just for that connection, but they both believed in one thing if nothing else: a newborn baby bore no sin. Tap 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 tap. Hearing the sound of footsteps, Roger raised an eyebrow and waited. It wasn't time for him to die yet, and it was way too early for them to deliver his final meal of prison slop. But it wasn't one of the prison guards that came up to his cell. It was a young Marine with blonde hair, the same one who caught him and beat him to a pulp. Gol D, Roger, Naruto bit out while turning to look at the man with a glare. I've waited years to hunt you down. Getting a good look at him, Roger's eyes widened. Minato, he thought before blinking, no, it can't be. Dressed in a white suit with a blue shirt and the Marine greatcoat with the symbol for justice written on the back hanging over his shoulders like a cape, Naruto grabbed one of the bars and glared at it before turning that glare on Roger. Years waiting to make you pay. Years training to make you suffer for what you and your crew did. But now you're in the cell. Kid, who are you? You don't remember me? Naruto exclaimed. How about Konoha? How about that old man you shot? How about every single freaking villager you and your damn crew slaughtered that day nearly 10 years ago? You don't know what you're talking about, kid, Roger told him, realizing what he was talking about. We weren't the ones attacking Dash. The bar that Naruto had been holding on to bent. Don't you freaking lie to me. I saw you there, Pirate King. I burned your face into my memories for years. But now you're stuck in there and I can't do anything about it, he growled before hearing the sound of someone opening the door to the holding cells of death row. I may not be able to kill you myself, but I'll take solace in the fact that today is the day you die. May you burn in hell for what you've done. In the 2 years that followed Pirate King Gol D, Roger's death, pirate activity skyrocketed. Marine brass all over cursed the man, for with his final words he gave birth to the so-called Great Age of Pirates, with people all over trying to find his hidden treasure dubbed One Piece. So with the increase in piracy, the Marines found themselves working harder where they either made a name for themselves or broke. For his capture of the infamous pirate, Gol D, Roger, Ensign Uzumaki Naruto had been awarded with a rare double promotion from ensign to lieutenant, while attaining the de facto rank of captain when on Vice Admiral Garp's ship. Garp had done this for the reason of giving the blonde some experience in commanding a ship, or that's what he said. Many believe that he just wanted to laze around the ship and let his apprentice do all the work that he should be doing. He remained a lieutenant for the few months before once again being promoted for his impressive record of taking down pirate crews without mercy and refusing to be bought like others had in the past. But aside from now being a lieutenant commander, he remained on the high seas hunting down any pirates that had the poor luck of flying a Jolly Roger around them. Well, where'd my donuts go? Garp yelled out from below deck before heading up top. His ship was much larger than a normal marine ship, due to his rank of course. It had many sails with each mast shaped like bones with dog paws, while the sails itself had marine symbols painted on them. The figurehead at the front of the ship was even shaped like a dog's head with a bone in its mouth, giving the whole ship a canine theme. It was armed with many large cannons that would easily overwhelm a normal ship, but if one were to ask, they'd find out that they were hardly used during Garp's command. The reason being that Garp liked to just throw cannonballs himself, so much so that they installed a convoy belt to supply him with a steady supply. But with Lieutenant Naruto calling the shots, some were actually used now. Many Marines jumped out of the way of the charging Vice Admiral as he ran down the halls of his ship and out onto the deck, nose flaring like a raging bull's before he caught sight of his target and reared back with his fist as he charged once again. His target, Naruto Uzumaki, who was standing at the bow of the ship wearing his marine greatcoat like a cape over top of his white and blue suit. As if sensing the attack, Naruto dodged Garp's swing, allowing him to punch the railing, which exploded like a cannon had hit it. What did you do with my donuts, brat? He roared while trying to hit the blonde over and over again, busting holes in the deck and breaking things. I told you about messing with them, and all I could find is that ramen crap. The blonde froze before growling. How dare you call my ramen that? He yelled back while throwing a punch of his own just as Garp did the same. Both punches met and both men flew back, Naruto bouncing 3 times on off of the deck before hitting a cannon while Garp fell to his ass, both without a scratch. Getting better, kid! The Vice Admiral laughed while standing up before turning serious. But what did you do with them? Laying on his back with both legs over the cannon, Naruto groaned. You ate them all, old man, don't you remember? Garp started picking his nose. Oh yeah, I did, didn't I? He mused, making his crew face fault. Oh well, looks like we're going to a town for more. The large man then turned to the damaged sections of his ship and then to the nearby Marines. You guys fix this, I'm gonna take a nap. Ignoring the crew's muttering about having to clean up after him, he walked by Naruto and grabbed him by the foot. But first, I gotta talk to you, come with me, he exclaimed before pulling him along behind him, uncaring if the 18-year-old hit his head on the steps as they walked up to the back of the ship, which was higher than the front. Standing on the deck a couple days later, Naruto waited for Garp to arrive. The other day, Garp had said that he had completed what training he could give him in Tekai, and that he'd be giving him a sort of final exam today. While many would be excited, he found himself a bit worried due to Garp's way of going way too far and over the top. He wouldn't be surprised if. Before he could finish it though, he sensed an attack coming and instantly activated Tekai just as 3 cannons went off, all fired at him and bouncing off, leaving him unharmed as the following wave of smoke washed over him. Tekai was a part of a martial arts style known as Rokushiki, or 6 styles, and while Garp didn't know them all, he himself knew Tekai, which was how to harden the user's muscles to that of solid iron, which would nullify damage taken from an attack. But one drawback was that he couldn't move while it was active. Congrats, kid, you passed, and as a gift, I've got you someone that can teach you more. Naruto looked at the man with a raised brow. You're pawning me off to someone already? Well, my way of saying it sounded much nicer, but yeah. Besides, I can't teach you anything else, you're like a sponge. But don't worry, I got the perfect person lined up to teach you. Okay, so what are you gonna be doing while I'm gone? Garp stuck his pinky up his nose boredly. Don't know really, maybe go and visit my friend over in Fushao village or take a vacation, he said with a shrug, almost feeling bad about lying. But how could he tell the kid that he was going to see poor Gasti, Rouge, lover to Gold, Roger and mother to said man's son? The woman was dying and he had given his word to protect the boy. It was sad that he just may have to lie to protect him from the blonde since he didn't know if his hate would pass on to the son. Naruto shrugged. Okay, well, who's going to teach me, and what about my hockey training? Garp actually smirked, scaring the blonde. As it turned out, he actually didn't have anything to fear at all from his new sensei. If anything, he liked her training better than Garp's. Her name was Tsuru, an elderly vice admiral known and feared as the great tactician. She was also known for her washu washu no mi, a paramecia-type devil fruit that literally made her able to wash and hang people or objects out to dry as if they were clothing, turning them flat and malleable like clothes. She was a shorter, pale blonde woman with wrinkles but had the wisdom and pride of a veteran marine. She taught him Soru, another part of Rokushiki which allowed him to move at extremely high speeds in order to dodge or attack. The elderly vice admiral also taught him more about both his Kenbunshiku haki as well as Byusashoku haki. Kenbunshiku, or observational haki, allowed the user to sense the presence of others even if they were hidden from view or too far to see. Like with most training, he took to it with gusto and was soon working on predicting an opponent's moves before they even made them. Byusashoku, or armament haki, allowed the user to create a force similar to invisible armor around them to defend against attacks much like his Tekai would, but the difference was that he was able to use it to attack and augment attacks, project it as brute force, or even imbue it into weapons to increase its effectiveness. Another plus was that it allowed him to bypass the powers of a devil fruit user, meaning that he could hurt someone that could normally brush off normal attacks thanks to one of those fruits. Tsuru, being older, had been stationed at Marineford, so for the time, he'd been staying there to train. At first he didn't like being cooped up there, but a certain something made it more enjoyable for him. She had been a student at the officers' academy when he first met her. She had slammed into him while running and yelled at him about watching where he was going, despite the fact that she had ran into him while he'd been standing still. After the yelling match that ensued, one thing led to another, and they found themselves engaged in a rather rough round of intercourse back in the small apartment he'd rented during his training. She was a confident and mischievous woman the same age as him, but was a promising student. After class she would meet him every once in a while just to work out their stress together and hang out. Either wanted a romantic thing, just one of those friends with benefits relations. She had the weirdest hairstyle, but she'd been a freak in the bed. Her name was Belmere. He'd remember it all right, that and more. She graduated later that year and he hated to see her go, but the night before she left, damn what a send-off. He later learned that a year later, around when he was 20, she managed to survive a battle between her crew and some pirates, ending in both sides losing the fight. She retired not long after, and the last time he heard from her was that she was happy and had adopted 2 little girls. Relaxing on his ship, a slightly larger than your run-of-the-mill marine ship outfitted with the standard deck cannons as well as the ones hidden behind hatches on the front and each side. 38-year-old Naruto Uzumaki laid in a lawn chair in a pair of orange swim trunks with his arms behind his head, while a pair of binoculars and an empty bowl of what had been ramen sat on the wood deck next to him as he soaked in the sun. That is, until a shadow covered him, blocking the sun. "Do you mind?" he hummed without opening his eyes. "I'm trying to relax here." The shadow didn't move. Instead, something fell and slammed into his head, but due to his hockey training and tack eye, it rolled off his forehead and onto someone's foot, making him yelp. Recognizing the voice, Naruto opened his eyes, and to his surprise he saw Garp standing there, or hopping in place while holding his foot. "Garp!" he exclaimed in shock at seeing the now white-haired, but still tough-looking old man. "What are you doing here?" The man calmed down as his foot stopped hurting. "Well, brat," the man started before sporting a large, proud grin. "Sengoku sent me to find you and your crew. Something about you taking too long on your vacation or something like that." Garp then looked around and laughed. "Who would have thought that you'd hang out at a place like this for your time off?" Naruto stood and joined him. His ship, along with Garp's, were anchored a right good ways away from an uninhabited island. Now it wasn't unheard of for an island to be uninhabited, but they were usually in the calm belt, 2 bodies of water that block off the Grand Line and have no current, or even wind, or the Grand Line itself due to the dangers with both. But they were in the East Blue, the so-called weakest area of the sea in the world, yet famous for being where Gol D, Roger, was from. The 75-year-old man then looked around and noticed something. "Hey, where's your crew?" "Training," Naruto told him without pause, almost suspiciously, which made Garp look around again with a raised eyebrow. There wasn't a soul on deck aside from him and Naruto, and he couldn't hear the sound of swords clashing or guns firing like when a crew was told to spar or have target practice. In fact, had he not seen the blonde tanning on the deck from his ship, which dwarfed the blondes, he could have mistaken it for a ghost vessel. "What kind of training?" Naruto didn't reply, and in the silence, he heard something off in the distance and turned to the island. It was too far for him to see without help, so he grabbed the binoculars from the deck next to the chair and looked out to see a group of Marines running from a group of kung fu dugongs, which were 3-foot-tall walrus/seal-looking animals renowned for their kung fu. Straining his ears, Garp was just able to hear them screaming, "Mercy, Naruto-sama! Please help us! And save us, boss!" Garp couldn't believe his eyes. Naruto had sent his men up to an island inhabited by kung fu dugongs while he relaxed on the ship. "How are dugongs in the East Blue? Aren't they from the coast near Alabasta?" Naruto shrugged. I guess they come down here every now and then, kinda like a migration." Garp hummed and chuckled at the sight of one man getting caught and beaten by the animals. "Violent little things, aren't they?" The blonde shook his head. "Of course not. They're actually pretty peaceful until you challenge them. I came out here a few years back and kinda disturbed their mating rituals by accident. But after beating them all, they became my loyal minions." He chuckled, making Garp bust out laughing. Dugongs were smart, honor-bound animals, and by their code of honor they believed that once they'd been defeated, they must become the follower of the one that defeated them. They also had certain alphas which were better at kung fu than the others, which gave them their own followers. That code also extended to them if the Master Dugong was defeated. He looked around some more and found that apart from the group that was trying to run, there was a smaller group of the animals being held back by a single marine. "Oh ho!" he chuckled. "Looks like that girl right there is holding her own." Naruto crossed his arms. He couldn't see who it was, but he had a pretty good clue. "Must be my Master Chief Petty Officer Tashigi," he mused with a grin. "She's good with the sword, but that's why I had her leave it here. Hasn't stopped her. Looks like she's made herself a wooden sword out of a tree limb." He shot back, which made Naruto laugh while leaning on the railing. "She's resourceful, I'll give her that, but you said that Sengoku sent you, right? I guess it's about time to go home anyway. You coming too?" Garp shrugged. "Nah, I'm gonna wait a while before I go back, maybe take a vacation myself." He chuckled, knowing that Fleet Admiral Sengoku would be annoyed. "Oh, and by the way, I never got to congratulate you on your last promotion. Youngest Vice Admiral in history, I always knew you'd make it. Too bad my foolish grandsons never followed your lead." Naruto nodded slowly, having been told about Luffy and Ace by Garp hundreds of times over the years, how he pushed them to grow up and become strong marines just like them, and train them even harder. But both had fallen to the allure of piracy, Ace because of the freedom that life seemed to have, and Luffy because he wanted to be like his hero the Yonko known as Red-Haired Shanks, and surpass him to become the next pirate king. Reaching under his chair, he pulled out a pistol with a large barrel before pointing it up into the air and firing a flare into the sky, signaling to the Marines on the island that they could come back and to signal to the Dugongs that they could stop kicking ass. "Hey, you still testing those special thingies you got from Vegapunk?" Dr. Vegapunk was the leading scientist in the employment of the Marines. He was most known for his work in discovering the secrets and uses of sea stone, the secrets of how Devil Fruit's powers work, and a vast number of other scientific achievements that were said to be 500 years ahead of current technology. Vegapunk had contacted Naruto years ago asking if he'd test out some special equipment every now and then, since he was out in the field a lot more than most. One such thing was a more recent experimental weapon made to use against Devil Fruit users. They already had cuffs and nets made out of sea stone to capture and restrain the pirates that had powers thanks to the fruits, but sometimes they were just too quick or could get out of reach before either could be used. So the good doctor came up with a more brutal solution. "I haven't had a reason to use them yet," he exclaimed as his crew finally made it back to the boat, having taken the rowboats to the island as well as back. They were all dirty and haggard looking, most beaten and bruised from their torture. I mean training. "All right, everyone, get cleaned up and take a rest. In the morning we're heading to Marineford." Everyone groaned in pain, although it almost sounded like annoyance. "You know, I'd have them go on and work through the pain," Garp hummed, finger in his nose as usual, making the men and women of Naruto's crew sing praises about their commanding officer, how he was so good to them and generally kissing his ass. "I would, but I figure that Sengoku can wait another day so that my crew can rest," he exclaimed with a grin which the other Vice Admiral mirrored before laughing once again. Turning to his crew, who had yet to leave as they awaited their orders, he waved them off. "You're all dismissed for the rest of the day, but be ready to sail in the morning." They all gave him a staggered salute and hobbled off to recover for the rest of the afternoon and night. They'd be sore as all hell in the morning, but it was better than having them fall asleep on duty and end up messing something up. "Well, kid, looks like I'll be going now," the childlike old man told him after the crew had gone below deck. "Oh, and before I forget, you still got that pet fur ball of yours running around ship? I got a score to settle with it for last time." The blonde sweat dropped. "Yeah, Q is still here, and no, you can't hurt her," he deadpanned while looking the man straight in the eye. Q was fox that he'd found some years back during one of his vacations in the Grand Line. She had been the size of a small horse at the time, and had attacked him out of hunger, while he'd been walking in a forest, but had been beaten easily. At first, he was shocked to see that the fox was so large, but chalked it up to being one of the many strange animals that inhabited the Grand Line. But imagine his surprise when the fox suddenly shrank to the size of a small kit, and started crying about being hungry, and how there was barely anything on this stupid island. As it turns out, One of the few things she'd been able to find was a rare Zoan devil fruit, and despite its horrible taste, she ate it. From what he could figure out, it had turned her into a Iki Kitsune or spirit fox, giving her the ability to speak and change her size like a mythical spirit fox was said to be able to do. He suspected that she might be able to do more later on, but that had yet to be discovered. But back to the story. After feeding her, she practically begged him to take her with him, promising not to get in the way and to do anything she could to help. Even telling him that she'd barely take up any room at all and showing him by shrinking down to the size of a newborn kit that would fit in his hand. To further strengthen her case, she jumped and grew to an even larger size, saying that she could help him fight before showing him her mouth full of razor-sharp teeth and equally sharp claws. She often didn't have to do anything when it came to fighting, but she did follow him around and acted as a sort of guard when he went out into towns when they made port. But she proved herself one day by ambushing Garp when he tried to test Naruto by sneaking up on him to see if he'd been keeping up on his training. When he thought that he was about to get the teen, Q suddenly popped up and sank her teeth into his rear, making the older man scream to the high heavens and refusing to let go, even as said man ran around like a chicken with its head cut off and set on fire. For the past couple of years, Garp had been trying to get revenge only to fail when Q outsmarted him, or when Naruto was around. For you see, few people could stand up to Garp and have a chance at winning in a fight. Even fewer had enough of the man's respect for him to listen to what they tell him when it comes to talking him out of something. Naruto was one of those rare few, and should talking to the man and trying to convince him fail. It was a coin toss as to who would win the fight, and by proxy, the argument. Fine then. Garp snipped before turning around and pouting childishly as he started back to his ship. Didn't want to see that mangy fur ball anyway. Naruto waved goodbye to the man. Yeah, I'll see you later, old man. Bye, brat. Marineford was more than just the headquarters of the Marines. Actually, the center of it was only a base, while the surrounding buildings was actually a thriving community for the families of the Marines stationed there. It had everything a town needed to thrive and be self-sufficient, while also being able to trade and ship things in and out that they might not otherwise be able to make, such as luxury goods and such. The crescent-shaped island was built like a fortress but was still city. The families there accepted the permanent military presence there and actually felt that it was safer there than anywhere else. After all, they had a massive standing force ready at the drop of a hat, not to mention the fact that the most powerful Marines such as the admirals and vice-admirals were often there for one reason or another. In the center of this city was a massive stone base with a tower standing high and proud in the sky. It housed the offices of all the most powerful men of the Marines, as well as the fleet admiral who, surprisingly enough, didn't have an office in the top floor but instead took the humble route and had one many floors down with the admirals and vice-admirals. And that was where Naruto found himself standing right now. It was an impressive to say the least. The man had a large aquarium built into the wall behind his desk where a school of fish swam around. It had once housed a shark, but the man had it released due to the tank being too small for it when he was promoted by the former Fleet Admiral Kong. He didn't have much on his desk aside from some blank papers and forms he needed to look over. There were a few paintings on the walls and some bookcases with random books on it, but none of it seemed personal. Sengoku was a tall and muscular man that was younger than Garp but said to be just as tough. He had a marine cap on his head with a life-size seagull figurine on the top that covered the top part of his large afro. The man also had a long braided beard that reached his belt, and a trimmed mustache above his lip, while a pair of black circle-rimmed glasses sat on his nose. Like all officers, he had on a marine greatcoat that symbolized his status and rank, which seemed more regal and distinctive than a standard one. He was also the only one to actually wear his white and gold admiral uniform, which he had all his medals pinned to at the chest. You called for me? Sengoku looked up and saw the blonde standing there grinning and almost mistook him for a younger version of Garp because of the way he spoke to him. That thought gave him chills. Garp was bad enough, and while Naruto sometimes acted just like the man whom trained him, the blonde would get serious when the need arose. He didn't know what he'd do if a young clone of Garp showed up. Probably send him to the furthest corner of the world and assign him to a base out in the middle of nowhere. Yes. He started before clearing his throat. First off, why didn't you answer any of the calls we sent you through your den mushi? A denden mushi was a special species of snail that have the ability to communicate with each other telepathically through radio waves. They were able to use them to communicate with others by attaching buttons and receivers to them, which surprisingly don't even bother the animal at all. In fact, most just look bored about the whole thing. Most marine ships were outfitted with them, and Naruto himself had one in his quarters since, as a vice marine, he needed to be reachable. Naruto shrugged. I was on vacation, so I decided to give it one too, he told the man, which made him sweat drop. Why, is something wrong? The man twitched. No, but your vacation ended and you were supposed to return a week ago. Really? The blonde asked, looking shocked. Wow. I thought it was 2 weeks ago. I must be running a little slow, hee hee hee. The fleet admiral took a deep, calming breath. Anyway, I'm sending you on a mission. Naruto turned serious. As you know, the Shichibukai are given a pardon for their former actions and have their bounties rescinded in exchange for 1/10 of whatever they make, even if it's from stealing and such. They must also perform certain tasks should they be told. I know this. What's with the history lesson? I'm getting to that. Now, as you know, we gave Boa Hancock, captain of the Kuja pirates and Empress of Amazon Lily, a position in the Shichibukai a few years back. But recently, she's stopped giving us the 10% of her treasure, and we know that her crew's been busy pillaging. Recently, we sent a crew to find out why, but we've yet to hear back. So you want me to go and find out what happened to the Marines you sent, and what their problem is? Naruto said, already figuring out what the man wanted him to do. Sengoku nodded. With your skills, I'm certain that you can handle the situation, and if needed, fight your way out. Now I don't want this to turn into a war with the Kuja, no matter how much we of he Marines outclass them, so handle this carefully. The blonde nodded and grinned. Of course, careful is my middle name. The man hummed, yeah right, after sometimes but not always, he thought to himself while dismissing the blonde. Amazon Lily! Naruto winced at the loud voice and leaned away from it while sticking his pinky in his ear. Oh, I'm not deaf, Tashigi-chan. He pouted childishly to the younger woman next to him as he stood on the deck of his ship while they made preparations to leave. Tashigi was a young, 21-year-old marine that had been serving under him as a sort of assistant and protege. She had dark, chin-length dark blue, almost black hair and dark brown eyes behind a pair of box-frame glasses, and opted to wear her civilian clothing over a uniform since she felt like it restricted her movements when she used her katana. She often wore various button-up shirts with floral patterns and tight jeans with a special made belt to hold her sword, making the men, even Naruto, find her attractive. But for all her skill and promise with her sword, she was very clumsy and often forgot to put on her glasses of all things, making for some interesting times on the ship. All the men found her attractive due to her swordsmanship and beauty, despite the fact that she was a Master Chief Petty Officer. Even the few higher-ranked crewmen listened to what she told them and were happy to do as told, so long as it didn't go against the Vice Admiral, that is. But it's in the calm belt. A breeding ground for sea kings, she frantically told him while he watched the men haul their supplies and store them below deck. He shrugged. So what? He replied to her statement before pointed to a group carrying a crate full of ramen labeled, property of Vice Admiral Uzumaki, with another sign taped to it reading, touch it and be charged with treason. So what? So what dash? He stopped her before she could continue making a scene. Tashigi-chan, have you forgotten that our ships are outfitted with sea stone on the hull? A sea king won't be able to sense us while we sail. Blushing, Tashigi laughed nervously while rubbing the back of her head. Oh yeah, how silly of me, she said, making the men gush while she was actually thinking, damn it, how can I embarrass myself like that in front of Naruto-sama? He must think that I'm such a loser. How will I ever impress him now? Naruto didn't mention that it only worked when they were on the move. If they sat in one place for too long, then the Sea Kings would eventually sense them and come to investigate. Sitting in his office, Sengoku looked over the file he had on Vice Admiral Uzumaki Naruto. It was a highly classified file containing the known information of said man, which could make things very hard if that information got out. But unlike most, which would contain family information, home villages, next of kin, and such, Naruto's only really had the information on his skills, seeing as his home village had been destroyed. His Kenbunchaku haki had been trained to the point that if he was serious, he'd be able to predict and counter attacks before they were made, but when he wasn't, it usually was to the point where he could sense an attack and dodge with his eyes closed, as shown by Garp's little surprise tests every now and then. His Busashoku haki was just as impressive. He often used a pair of hidden blades and imbued them to make it so that he could cut nearly anything, even if his blade missed by an inch or two, almost as if a blade of wind had cut the target. The level he was at wasn't quite matching Garp's, but it was still very impressive, especially when he recently started throwing cannonballs back at Garp. A knock at his door broke his train of thought before he called the person to come in. "Ah, sir, we got this package for you in the mail," the Marine told him uncertainly. "I'm afraid that it doesn't have a return address, but it's got the OK from security." Telling the man to bring it in, he found himself looking at a box wrapped in brown paper and tied in twine. He opened it, and to his shock found a birthday card. "What the? It's not my birthday!" he muttered before shrugging. Security had checked it over and there wasn't any danger of poison or it being a bomb, besides he liked cake. Opening the box, he gaped at what he saw. There he was, nude and fornicating with his little pet goat. It was so insulting, but oh so tasty. If he ever found out who made the thing, he'd have them arrested and face a firing squad. That is, of course, that is after he had them tell him the recipe. 2 miles out from the island known as Amazon Lily, Vice Admiral Naruto and his crew found themselves anchored in the middle of the calm belt and waiting for a Kuja's ship to arrive. They knew that they could see them from their island and would soon be there to meet them. After all, their agreement stated that as long as Hancock was working for them, no marine vessel would come within 3 miles of their home. So as an attention-getter, he had them get closer. Due to the stories about the Kuja women, the entire crew was nervous, frightened by the stories of monsters in human skin that turned people into stone. So every marine on the ship was on the deck armed with a rifle, while Tashigi held her katana and Naruto. "Naruto, what are you doing?" The woman gaped at the sight of him shirtless and in his orange swimsuit as he laid out on his lawn chair with his 2 weapons on the floor next to his chair, a pair of sunglasses over his eyes, and sunscreen on his body, making it shiny. Oh so shiny. She shook her head to clear those bad thoughts. "Tanning, what do you think I'm doing?" he deadpanned before smirking. "Why don't you join me? I'll even help you put your sunscreen on if you like." His smirk then vanished as his head jerked to the side, looking out at the sea. Blushing, she started to say something only for the ship to shake, making the crew scared before a massive fish rose from the water. It was all white with darker colored fins and lips with pointed teeth and solid white eyes. "S.A. King!" Someone screamed before they all started shooting, but it was useless. Bullets and cannonballs bounced off its flesh as if they were rubber, making them scream out that they were doomed as it turned and bared its teeth at them. "It's gonna eat us!" Tashigi cried out before an orange streak flew past her, making her hopes soar as she saw Vice Admiral Naruto sailing through the air with his twin blades in hand, both glowing a blue-white color, as he neared the monster. It roared loudly and moved to crush them before stopping as a massive wound opened up across its face that ruptured its left eyes and cut the right side of its mouth, followed by another that destroyed the right eye and cut the left part of its mouth. In a bright white flash, the center of its head slid apart before its right and left half both separated and fell into the sea. There was a silence over the waters before Naruto landed on the deck, his short swords red with blood as he smirked. "That, Tashigi, is why I do not fear the Sea Kings." As the ship steadied itself from the waves caused by the now dead Sea King, the Marines on deck felt their worries vanish as their commanding officer single-handedly killed the attacking beast. Some of the sword users even gushed at being able to see the Vice Admiral in action with his 2 weapons. "Amazing!" One spoke to his friend next to him while looking at the 2-bladed weapons. "It's the first time I've ever seen Vice Admiral Naruto use his weapons in person." The 2 weapons were identical in every way, even down to the weight some if the rumors about them were true. They were what looked like short katana-like swords with the blades measuring 9 inches long with a 5-inch handle, making the whole thing a little over a foot long. But the guard between the blade and handle didn't match that of a katana and curved down to the bottom of the grip with a series of sharpened points that looked like teeth going down the whole thing. They didn't have an official name given to it by the forger, and Naruto never bothered with naming them himself, so the pirates that managed to see them in action named them the Blades of Absolute Justice or something like that. Heading back to his lawn chair, Naruto dropped the blades next to him, which stuck in the deck, before sitting back down and adjusting his sunglasses as if nothing happened, while everyone looked at him. "Everyone," he called out after a minute. "I know I'm sexy, but you should all be looking out for the Kuja, not staring at me." That snapped everyone out of their daze, and things seemed to go back to normal, although some of the sailors found themselves cleaning the side of the ship, which now had Sea King blood splattered on it. "How long are they going to make us wait?" Tashigi complained while standing close to where he was. "Surely they've noticed us." The blonde hummed. "They have, but if I'm right, they decided to wait for us to be attacked by a Sea King to see how we handled it." "Naruto-sama!" called out one of the marines watching the waters with his binoculars. "I see a ship approaching us from the island. It's being pulled by a pair of Yuda." The blonde hummed. "Took them long enough." Yuda were a species of ferocious and extremely poisonous type of sea serpent. They were in fact so poisonous that Sea Kings stayed away from them for fear of being bitten. The Kuja pirates had somehow domesticated them, and used them as both a deterrent from Sea Kings and a way to push their boat through the calm belt. Standing up, Naruto grabbed his weapons and walked off to the rear of his ship into his room, or sometimes called the captain's cabin, where he stripped out of his bathing suit and slipped into his boxers and white dress pants before tossing them onto the bed. "Ah, what the dash!" came a voice from the ball of blankets near his headboard before they started moving, moments before the red furry head of his pet popped out, looking around before spotting him. "Why'd you throw that at me?" "Sorry about that, Q." He grinned before taking a blue dress shirt from a hanger and pulling it on, tucking the shirt tail into his pants and moving on to his white shoes. "Forgot you were sleeping there." The fox grumbled and got out of the sheets which she'd burrowed into sleep. "What's going on?" "Meeting with the Kuja. Got to find out what happened to our marines and collect some money," he told the fox while tying his shoes and standing up to retrieve his white blazer. She waited until he put it on and jumped onto his shoulder. "Aren't they the snake-using tribe?" the fox questioned, growling when he nodded. "I hate snakes." "Well, if push comes to shove, we might just have to fight them," he told her while heading back out, picking up his great coat on the way and pausing only to slide his short swords into hidden sheaths inside his blazer. Q shrunk to an even smaller size and hopped up onto his head when he put on the coat like a cape. Now fully dressed for duty and armed for a fight, she had even noticed a holstered gun hidden near the small of his back before. "I almost hope they do try to fight us," she growled. "I haven't had a good fight since we took down those dog pirates." Naruto hummed. "A while back, they took down one of the 3 Inuzuka pirate captains. It wasn't actually a hard fight seeing as it was the youngest of them, but Q had fun fighting the captain's pet dog, which had been trained to fight. The captain had been a younger man by the name of Kiba Inuzuka, the brother of Hana Inuzuka, a well-known pirate captain and son of Tsum Inuzuka, a notorious pirate captain that men all over the world feared. Last he heard, Tsum and Hana managed to break their son/brother out of captivity on his way to Impel Down after he had turned the guy over to a transport. Kiba supposedly tried to put a price on his head until he learned just who the man that took him down was and decided to stay on his mother's ship. But that was the rumors. Returning to the forward deck, he only had to wait a minute before the Kuja pirates pulled up alongside them. Their flag was of a skull in the center of a spiral made of snakes. The ship itself was a basic galleon with a pink mansion-like structure in the middle with paddle wheels installed in the rear for when they weren't using the Yuda, or maybe to air them, who really knew aside from them. The sails were deep red with their Jolly Roger painted on the foremost sail with another smaller sail above that one, and a medium-sized one in the rear. Like them, the Kuja pirates were all on their deck, which was about the same height as theirs. But while the marines were armed with their swords or guns, the Kuja stared at them coldly, some holding their signature snake weapons which were in the form of usable bows. Every Kuja wore a bikini bottom and top, all different colors and made of different materials. Some females were small and lean while others were large, muscular and overweight but all ready to fight. "You sure have guts, dropping anchor right in the middle of this monster-filled sea," called one of the females. She had short dark hair and wore tiger fur. Not only that, but you're violating the treaty we have. You Marines shouldn't be within 3 miles. We are well within our rights to be here. Naruto called as he walked up to the railing, Q sitting on his shoulder and glaring at the many snakes. You Kuja have broken the treaty first. Your Empress status as a Shichibukai is in danger, and as you know, as long as she is one of the 7 warlords, your island will remain safe. The treaty they had with Amazon Lily indeed protected the island from them, but the only way that happened was to have the entire population of their island classified as pirates. As you could see, if Boa Hancock's status was revoked, Amazon Lily would most likely be the target of a buster call, the Marines' ultimate show of force. What do you want, man? Turning his head, Naruto saw that the door to the mansion on the Kuja ship was open and out came 3 women. The first was a large, obese yet muscled woman with large breasts and long orange-brown hair styled like a Valkyrie's helmet. Like the others, she wore a bikini top and bottom with a long white cape and carried a large halberd. From Marine intelligence, she was one of Boa Hancock's younger sisters, Boa Marigold. The next was lime green-haired woman that was just as tall but much thinner with a large head. She, like her sister, wore a long white cape and had a green bikini with brown leather boots on her feet, while wearing one long green stocking with the Jolly Roger on it. Another thing about her that stood out was her tongue, which hung out of her mouth and was forked like a snake's. She was the other younger sister, Boa Sandersonia. They walked out and stepped aside as the third woman walked out. It was the one that spoke before, Boa Hancock. Compared to her sisters, she was the most normal of the 3. She was tall but not like her younger sisters and slender with long black hair that hung past her waist with locks of hair framing her face down past her chin. Like many of the Kuja, she had large breasts that she showed off under a revealing red blouse and wore a loose sarong around her waist that exposed her long and slender legs. She glared at the Marine ship with hate, mainly because of the men on board, before looking at the blonde Vice Admiral coldly as she walked down the steps. A small kitten was playing with a ball on the deck and pounced on it in front of the woman, making her look down with a sneer. Just who in the world, she spoke while taking another step towards it, would leave a kitten in my path? It looked over and noticed her with innocent eyes and a playful look before Hancock kicked it through the air and out of her way, much to the shock of the Marines. It hit the deck of their ship and rolled a few times, dazed and trying to stand. Its owner, a large Kuja, dropped to her knees and picked it up, holding it to her chest before looking up to Hancock. I'm so sorry, she cried. I'll take full responsibility. She looked down at the woman and placed her hand on her hip, cocking her waist to the side. Please do be more careful next time. Why, yes, ma'am. The cat snapped out of its daze and yowled at the one who kicked it, swiping feebly at her with its claws. The beautiful pirate Empress crossed the deck and onto the head of the Udao before pointing her finger towards the Marines, making it turn and carry her out to them where she stood looking down on them. As the woman got near, the crewmen noticed just how beautiful she actually was and started blushing with hearts in their eyes. That's the pirate Empress, gushed one as he stared. Her beauty really is unparalleled. Boa Hancock, Naruto mused while looking at her as the other 2 sisters moved to join her on the serpent's head. I'm here looking for the crew we sent to retrieve what you owe us. Tashigi leaned over. Don't forget that you need to get the money as well. Naruto nodded. Yeah, and what she said? Hancock looked at him expressionlessly. Those men are dead. Really? Yes, and I refuse to hand over the money. However, I would like to ask that you don't strip me of my position as a warlord, she told him softly, making the men gasp with hearts pulsing about them comically. Of course, Empress-sama, cried one of the men next to Naruto, only for said man to punch him over the head and knock him face first into the deck. Sorry, Naruto-sama. She smiled softly. Also, I would also like all the valuables stored on your ship, she said, knowing that the men were all under her spell, lusting over her beauty. Naruto chuckled. Who in their right mind would agree to that? He laughed. Stop acting like a spoiled brat. The blonde slowed to a stop as he saw his men, even the females, start running off to gather said valuables, leaving him and Tashigi standing there. Tashigi, who somehow wasn't head over heels like the others, slapped her forehead as they vanished below deck. Those idiots! The first two to return came out of the cargo hold carrying a crate, while others approached with chests and bags ready to throw over to the Kuja. But when a cold wave engulfed them, they snapped out of it to see the Vice Admiral standing there with shadows over his eyes. Q saw what set him off and jumped from his shoulders and onto Tashiji's head, laughing as her bushy red tail waved in the air. "Ha ha ha, you guys are fucked now!" She cackled while pointing at them with her tail before it went back to moving lazily through the air. The two she pointed at blinked and looked at each other. "What did we?" the first said before looking down and losing all the color in his face, which was twisted in horror. The second mirrored the expression, and both quickly found themselves alone as the others hurried back down below deck to return the items. The crate wasn't too large or valuable looking, it had already been opened a number of times too. But it had two signs on the front reading, "Property of Vice Admiral Uzumaki," and "Touch it and be charged with treason." "Please Naruto-sama, have mercy on us!" the first one screamed as they set it down and dropped to their knees, pressing their foreheads to the deck as the blonde hovered over them like a wrathful demon. The three sisters twitched and took a small, barely noticeable step back as they had felt a wave of cold terror wash over them. Hancock stared at the blonde responsible for this power, while her sisters glanced to each other then over to their own crew. Some of the weaker ones had already dropped to their knees, their eyes wide open and unfocused, mouths open with a look of fear etched on their faces. The stronger ones were breathing heavier and shaking, but not as bad as the others were. Naruto slowly stalked towards the two that dared to try and give his ramen away, fist clenched to the point where the joints popped audibly. They noticed this and stopped bowing, flinging themselves up and falling onto their asses where they tried to crawl away. But there was no use in trying to crawl away or plead for mercy. Naruto pounced on the pair and the three vanished in a cloud of dust as the sounds of screaming, pleading, crying, and two men getting their asses beat filled the air. The Kuja all sweat dropped but found themselves able to breathe normally again as that terrifying feeling suddenly vanished. When the comic dust cloud vanished, Naruto stood next to the mast while clapping the dust from his hands while the two Marines were tied upside down to the mast beaten black and blue with their underwear pulled up and hooked over their heads. "Now I hope you two have learned your lesson. Next time I won't be so nice," he spoke, making them nod slowly. "Yes, Naruto-sama," the first wheezed out with a swollen face while the other looked just as bad. Turning back to Hancock, he walked over to where he'd be directly in front of her and cleared his throat. "Sorry about that. Now, back to what I was saying. Seeing as my first objective is complete, now I'm going to need what you owed the Marines, 10% of your wealth." Hancock seemed to think about this before sitting down on the Yuda's head and crossing her legs sensually. When he didn't get an answer quickly, Naruto crossed his arms in annoyance. "It is either that or your position as a Shichibukai will be taken. Make up your mind. This is your last chance." "I like being one of the warlords," she mused while looking down her nose at the blonde. "I do not wish to forsake that position, however. I despise the world government." "Tell me, man." She spat the word but looked at him with a smug little smile. "What do you think of this? The Marines who came to contact me all get involved in a mysterious accident at sea and died after they were all turned to stone." Naruto cocked his head to the side while the Marines that had finally returned recoiled and readied their weapons, drawing their swords and holding their guns tighter. Tashiji stood closer behind Naruto with Q on her shoulder and held her katana close to her chest. "Stay on your guard," one man told the others. "I once heard about a ship that had been attacked by the Kuja pirates, and heard that all the people on that ship had turned into creepy statues." Seeing his men act so scared, Naruto looked down and shook his head before chuckling. "Cute story, but you should really stop acting like such a spoiled brat." Sonia giggled and leaned forward, looking at the blonde. "Our elder sister's personality is terrible, but she always gets what she wants." "Indeed," Marigold nodded. "And there is a reason why she always gets what she wants." Hancock uncrossed her legs and slid down the Yuda's head, jumping onto the Marine ship and landing in front of Naruto. "Do you know why that is?" She smirked while cocking her hip to the side and placing her hand on it. "No matter what I do, even if I were to kick a kitten, even if I were to kill that fox, even if I were to kill a person, the world would forgive me for it. Because I am beautiful." The Kuja squealed like fangirls for their empress. hearts pulsing in their eyes. The Marines all had similar reactions and started to chant that they forgave her, only to be knocked over like bowling pins when Naruto punched the closest one upside the head and caused a chain reaction. Hancock smirked arrogantly and flipped her hair back over her shoulders. "Sinful hearts that long for me," she hummed before holding out her arms and making a heart shape with her hands. "May your bodies harden! Marrow marrow dash!" The snake princess was stopped in her tracks as the crack of a gunshot echoed through the air. "Sister!" Hancock's younger siblings screamed as they saw the blonde man fire a gun at point-blank range. Hancock stopped and reached up to her ear, where she had a pair of golden snake earrings hanging low from her earlobe, or she did have two. The bullet had barely missed her face and broke the small ring holding the snake to the piercing, leaving her completely unharmed but damaging her earring. "It's a good thing that you're so close," Naruto exclaimed while still aiming the pistol. "Normally I use throwing knives, but I've decided to use this instead, now. I'm getting annoyed with your games. Hand over what you owe and we'll be on our way." She looked at him in shock. Not only had he not fallen for her beauty, but he actually threatened her and shot at her. No one had ever even dared to do that before. Lowering the gun, Naruto smiled sweetly at her. "I'll wait here. You got until tomorrow afternoon to return with the money, or I'm leaving and the treaty is off." "Sister, are you okay?" Hancock waved her sister's question off. Marigold glared at the marine ship next to theirs as they left back towards the island on their sister's order. "How dare that man! He should pay for this!" She ignored her little sister's rant, placing a hand to her chest. "What is this strange feeling in my heart?" she questioned herself while heading back into the mansion on her ship. "I can't believe we got through all that without any more problems," Tashigi muttered loudly as they exited the calm belt and headed back towards Marineford with a bunch of chests, bags, and crates full of treasure safely stored away in the ship's cargo hold. Q, still the size of a newborn kit, grumbled about not being able to fight those snakes from her place in Tashigi's hair while Naruto looked around, seeing a few sailors here and there doing what they were supposed to do without being told. "Well?" the blonde exclaimed before turning from the stack of treasure and towards the young woman. "Time to head on back and take the kids home," he exclaimed, jokingly referring to the crew as his children. "You do realize that some of the crew is just as old as you, right?" she deadpanned before squeaking when he wrapped his arms around her and mock cried. "They grow up so fast." Face blushing, she spun around so that he wouldn't see her blushing once he let go. He smirked. "I'm going to head on up and check to make sure that we're on course, Tashigi-chan. Be a dear and finish taking an inventory of what we got." She nodded. "Why, yes, sir," her face still burning red. Q hopped off the girl's head and ran after Naruto as he walked away, snickering the whole way. Upon returning to Marineford, Naruto had his crew take all the treasure from Hancock and, under guard, had it taken to the appropriate place for processing and storage. But something was missing. In one of the chests, there had been an even smaller chest which was now gone, not that anyone noticed. Q grinned to herself while pushing the miniature chest under Naruto's bunk with her head. "I hope you like it, Naruto-kun," she said happily while laughing to herself. Ever since he saved her from that torturous existence on that island, she wanted nothing more than to make him happy and keep him safe. Now, with him being who he is, she knew that the last part would be a challenge since he'd always do something potentially dangerous, like shoot at that snake woman and attack a Sea King head-on. So she figured if she couldn't always be there to try and protect him, why not help him get stronger? When they were looking over the treasure, she smelled something familiar but decided not to say anything at the time, opting to wait until the night to check it out herself. Sneaking through to the cargo hold had been easy for her due to her size-changing ability, so she made it and sniffed out the object. With her tail, she had opened the correct chest and found another half buried underneath some gold and paper money. But it had been locked, and she wasn't able to open it. The smell was strong to her, reminding her of the fruit that had given her these powers. She wanted Naruto to have it but wasn't sure of what he'd say or do if he knew that she basically stole it from the Marines to give to him. So she took it and hid it, carefully moving it each night until she managed to get it into his room. He didn't really have many places to hide it though. He had a desk, one of those standing closets, a dresser, some chairs here and there, and lastly his bed. But luckily for her, he had bought her one of those pet beds which she had pulled under his bed a year or so ago, and pretty much forgot about since she took to sleeping with him every night where it was much warmer. So, pushing the small chest as far as she could, she pulled the small pet bed in front of it, and started crawling back out. Now that she had it, all she had to do was find a way to give it to him without causing a problem. The door to the room swung open loudly, making her jump, hitting her head on the wooden slats below the bed and curse. "Q?" Naruto asked while seeing the fox's rear end poking out from below his bed and hearing her curse. "What's wrong?" "And nothing," she replied, scurrying out and rubbing a bump on her head. "Just hit my head is all." He looked at her for a minute and shrugged. "As long as you're okay, I guess," he mused before looking around and picking up his wallet from the top of his dresser. "We're heading out again in the morning and I'm about to go pick some stuff up. You want to come?" She shook her head. No, I'm fine with staying here." She laughed weakly. "But will you pick me up some of my favorite snacks again?" The blonde looked at her for a second. "You know, you're acting weird," he told her, making her sweat. "Did you do something? You got another fox in here?" She sweat dropped. "Of course not. No Garden Variety fox could ever hope to measure up to this vixen." He smirked. Yeah, don't get a kink in your tail. I'm just messing with you." She waited until he left and gave a sigh of relief. She doubted that he would be mad with her about stealing that chest for him, but if he did find it, she hoped that they were already out to sea. His first thought would be to give it to that weird man Dr. Vegapunk if they were here at Marineford. At least if they were out at sea, he'd listen to her reasons and hopefully she'd talk him into it. "How'd you ever convince me into coming shopping with you?" sighed Tashigi as she walked with him through the marketplace close by the civilian docks of Marineford. There were 3 military docks on the island. The first was the main one directly in front of the tower which connected with the base, while the other 2 were behind the tower. Looking at it from a map, if one were to draw a line connecting them together, they'd see that the docks were strategically built so that they could deploy and aid another dock, forming a near-perfect triangle of defense. But there was another harbor built for the civilians, where fishermen could dock and offload their catch and merchant ships could do the same. "Because you love shopping," Naruto hummed while nodding to the people around him. His capture of Gol D. Roger all those years ago had made him a hero to many people. Even now marine families would wave and nod to him, even some children tried to act like him. "Besides, Tashigi-chan, I said I'd buy you something nice." He rubbed his chin in thought. "So what would you like? A new sword, clothes, shoes?" Seeing her looking around and not paying him much attention, he smirked. "How about a new bathing suit or maybe even some sexy new lingerie?" "Well, She caught what he said and blushed. "This isn't the place for joking like that." He laughed. "So you admit that you like the idea? Maybe when we get back to the ship we can— Hey, what are you doing with that?" the blonde questioned while she held her sword up and brought it down on his head, cracking the case but not bothering the blonde at all. "Ow, Tashigi-chan, what did you hit me for?" She turned away. "For being perverted," the girl simpered, trying to sound angry while blushing at the thought of them returning to his ship, booting Q out of his room, and locking the door to his quarters before showing him her underwear and doing so much more. When she came back from her own perverted daydream, she noticed that the case to her sword was cracked, almost making her feel bad for hitting him so hard before remembering that he could handle worse. Naruto-sama, my case is cracked, can we stop by the— Naruto-sama?" Looking around, she saw him walking away and ran up to catch him. After they dropped her sword off to have the case repaired and to have the blade sharpened while it was there, they continued their shopping, picking up anything that they might need for their next trip. Naturally, they placed an order for a whole crate of ramen as he usually did, seeing as the base didn't offer it in the usual rations they supplied them with. So to fix that, he used his own money to buy a supply of ramen to last him, much like how Garp bought tons of donuts and other snacks. He also allowed his crew to do the same. If they wanted to spend the money, they were more than welcome to bring their own food if they didn't want what the ship's cook was serving. That was what she liked about him. For all his strength, he was a kind man and— "Hey Tashigi-chan, don't you need some new training sweats?" he called out, breaking her train of thought while holding up a pair of seemingly normal gray sweatpants. She nodded. Yes, thank you, Naruto-sama. He smiled at her and folded them up. She didn't need to know that they had the words Foxy Girl printed across the rear right over her ass. Not yet, anyway. As they paid for them, she accepted the bag with a smile, matching his own before leaving. So, what are we doing this time? Another assignment like last time? He shook his head at her question. Not this time, actually. I've heard some rumors about a friend of mine getting into some trouble. Something about being corrupt and stealing money from the base he commanded. He told her while losing his smile and turning serious. I don't believe it for 1 minute. He's not that kind of person. I'm going there to question him myself and find out what's going on. Where? A marine base out in the East Blue, stationed by a small town on Shell Island. Arriving to Shell Island some days later, having had the crew work in shifts to sail night and day, Naruto jumped off the ship and onto the harbor before his marines even got a hold of the gangplank for them to disembark. Following his lead, Q jumped and landed gracefully on the wooden dock right next to him before stretching out and yawning while Tashigi walked down the gangplank once it was up. So this is Shell Island, huh? She questioned lightly while adjusting her glasses. Naruto glanced at her and hummed at her choice of clothing, which were strangely more sexy than usual. Her jeans were hugging her rear and thighs as always, but they were much lower than usual. If it wasn't for her floral shirt, he had no doubt that he'd see her panties. Lastly, she had on her jean coat with the fur collar. He nodded to her question before turning to the Marines exiting the ship and lining up to await their orders. Half of you stay with the ship, the other half will come with us. No wandering around the town until I give the okay, got it? They saluted. Good, now I'm sure that I don't have to warn you, but I will anyway. If I catch you screwing around, you'll end up like those 2 idiots tied up in the crow's nest. They sweat dropped. He still hadn't forgave those 2 for trying to give his ramen away, and after a day or 2, he had them tied to the bow of the ship like figureheads do to their stench, giving them a day-long shower of salt water to clean them up. He then informed them that their punishment would continue for the next 2 weeks, and that they were to sit there and think about their mistakes, having to be fed by a fellow crewmate every day. Speaking of which, you can let them loose now, it's been long enough. The blonde mused before turning and heading down the wooden dock towards the aptly named Shell Village, which stood between them and the marine base. Towards the end, he noticed a small boat with a single mast and sail, which made him raise an eyebrow. Surely someone didn't sail around in that little thing? Achoo! Sneezed a dark-haired teen as he walked down the street in Shell Village. He was a thin young man with a scar under one eye, wearing a red vest and blue jean shorts with a pair of simple flip-flops on his feet and a straw hat on his head. His partner, a younger kid with round glasses and pink hair, looked at him. Luffy, are you okay? Luffy rubbed his nose. Yeah, just a sneeze. He grinned while looking down at the boy half his height. Nothing to worry about, Kobe. Now let's go talk to Zoro again. Walking through Shell Village with half of the Marines under his direct command following him, Naruto looked around with a frown on his face. Tashigi-chan, am I ugly or scary looking? And no, why would you ask that? She asked back, confused by the question that came up out of nowhere. Look at the villagers. Looking around, she saw that while there were people out and about, they were looking at them in fear and terror. I see, but why are they afraid of us? Just leave us alone, cried a little girl as she glared at them from a sidewalk. The little girl's mother paled and grabbed her daughter by the arm. Honey, no, don't do that, you'll get in trouble, she told the girl before bowing to them. Please, sir, I'm so sorry for what she said to you, please forgive us. Naruto turned. Tashigi-chan, I have a pretty good idea of what's going on, he muttered darkly before setting off towards the base, his cape billowing behind him. Come along, if I'm right then we got some ass to kick. Heading deeper into the island, he got into the middle of the village and heard a woman scream, followed by a growl and more panicked voices. Move, move! Laughed an annoying voice from around a corner. Clear the way for my cute pet! Turning the corner, he came to a stop as he saw what was going on and frowned. Villagers were running out of the way as a full-grown wolf growled and snapped at anyone that got close, scaring children and frightening anyone that got too close. But behind it he saw a blond man wearing a black suit with an orange shirt strolling along with a sword slung over his shoulder, smirking arrogantly while a few Marines followed him. "Move!" the man laughed as he looked at the fearful people. "Anyone in the way of my pet will be executed by my father, Captain Morgan." Seeing the wolf pounce on a man, snarling at the screaming person, Naruto glared. "Okay, I've seen enough. Q, take care of it." The vixen chuckled. "With pleasure." Growling, the small fox grew to the size of a miniature horse and sped towards the menacing wolf, tackling it much to the shock of the younger blond man and the Marines stationed at the island. Q's claws cut through the wolf with ease as her jaws closed around the wolf's throat, making it yelp and try to escape from the pain as blood spilled onto the ground. The whole thing only lasted a few seconds, ending with a loud crunch before the wolf went limp, its neck crushed in the large vixen's powerful jaws. "WW, what the hell is that thing?" the blonde with the strange hairstyle cried out in fear, watching as Q mangled the wolf by ripping its throat out in a spray of blood. "Men, shoot it!" "I wouldn't do that if I were you, daddy's boy." Despite what he just saw, the man turned to the voice. "Who thinks that they can talk to me like that?" he yelled before seeing Naruto and his crew standing there. "You Marines, who do you think you are?" Naruto chuckled, as did the men that came with him while Q trotted over, licking the blood on her snout. "You dare have your thing kill my pet? I'll have you killed, just you wait until my father hears about this." The man ran away, off towards the base. "Come on, let's not keep Daddy waiting," he mocked before heading towards the base. Upon reaching the base, he cocked his head to the side when he noticed that the alarm was going off. "Okay, something is seriously fucked up around here," he muttered before looking to Tashigi. "Tashigi-chan, take the men and find out what the hell is going on here." She nodded. "What about you?" "I'm going to find my friend. I trust you to do the right thing." Getting into the base was simple enough. There wasn't even any guards around to ask him who he was or anything, so he made his way down to the prison area and went to the holding cells, all of which were empty besides one. "And Naruto?" The blonde smiled and walked up to the cell. "Hey Iruka-sensei, never thought I'd see you behind bars." Standing at the door to the prison cell, Naruto studied the man before him. He had long graying brown hair pulled back into a low ponytail that had once been spiky and stuck straight out of his head, but now it was dirty and fell down to his neck. His skin was pale, a far cry from the tan man he once knew, but the scar across his now wrinkled face gave him away, that telltale scar that defined the now 50-plus-year-old man. "Naruto-kun?" Iruka smiled while groaning as he stood up from the small cot he'd been sitting on. "Just look at you." He laughed. "It's been years since you've been a student at the academy and I'm still sensei to you. I told you once, kid, I can't teach you anything else, besides, you're my superior now." Naruto gave a small snort of laughter. "Well, apparently you still got something to teach me, eh?" he mused while tapping the bars between them. "What happened?" Iruka scoffed and turned away, walking back to his cot with a small limp. "That bastard Morgan," he huffed, sitting down roughly, "framed me for embezzling and some other bullshit. You know me, kid, you know I wouldn't do something like that." Naruto nodded. "Yeah, I know, sensei, but don't worry, I'll set things straight for you," he said, making the man smile. "But first, let's get you out of this cell." Haki flowed into the cell door from Naruto's hands before the locking mechanism broke, allowing the door to swing open on its own. Iruka slapped his forehead. "Brat," he huffed with a small laugh. "You haven't changed a bit. The keys were right over there." Turning his head, he saw the large key ring hanging from a hook, sparkling mockingly. Oh, well, it doesn't matter. It's the thought that counts. But listen, I'll wait here until everything dies down. I'm not as young as I once was. This old marine will just have to leave the fighting to you young ones." "Damn, Iruka," Naruto smirked. "You really have gotten old and feeble." A tin cup bounced off his head. "What did you say, you idiot? Drop and give me 20. Having a flashback, Naruto started doing push-ups before stopping on the 15th. "Wait a minute!" he exclaimed before jumping back to his feet. "I'm a vice admiral, Captain Iruka. I should be telling you to do push-ups." The man waved him off. You wouldn't tell an old man like me to do that now, would you? He asked jokingly before turning serious. Look, a week or so back, I heard some of the Marines talking. They got some young swordsman tied to a post in the execution yard because of Morgan's spoiled son Helmeppo. Naruto snorted at the name. Blonde hair, kinda looks like a watermelon, whines a lot and hides behind daddy all the time? Irika nodded. Yeah, well, the guy is innocent, so don't let him be punished for something he didn't do. Now hurry and go kick some ass for me, I'll wait here. The sound of something large being smashed followed by a small shake in the earth made them look around. What the hell was that? Irika exclaimed. I don't know, but I intend to find out. Walking out onto the execution field, Naruto raised an eyebrow as he looked around. The field was a large, open area surrounded by high stone walls on three sides with hard, dry grassless soil all around it like a makeshift desert. On the far side in the center, there was a wooden post stuck in the ground with another wooden piece sticking off the sides like a cross. Laying all along the field were the Marines based there, most beaten up while a few were cut, but the biggest attention-getter was the base commander, one Captain Axe-Hand Morgan. Or he should say, one soon-to-be former captain. Naruto-sama? Turning his head, he saw Tashigi running over while a few of the men had Morgan's son in chains, screaming about having them executed for treating him like this. Oh, just shut the hell up already! One of the men yelled before punching Helmeppo in the gut, knocking the air out of him with an angry look on his face. He then realized what he did and looked to Naruto, knowing that he'd be in trouble for what he just did. Naruto looked at the man. You know the rules, right? Why, yes, sir. The man seemed to try and shrink into himself. You know that you could get into some serious trouble for hitting a prisoner that's already in our custody, right? He nodded. The blonde looked away. Don't do it again, that's your warning, but next time take the cuffs off, then hit him. Everyone's sweat dropped. So, what do we do, Naruto-sama? The woman asked him while looking around. I have some of the men going through the base files. I thought that it'd be a good start. He nodded. Good thinking, Tashigi-chan, but first things first, disarm Captain Morgan and have him imprisoned, then have someone get Captain Irika out of the holding cells so that he can get looked over by a medic. He stopped, letting her know that was all he wanted her to do before looking to a man that wasn't doing anything. You, return to the ship and bring me my denden mushi. With that, he looked around and noticed something. And could someone tell me where Q got off to? Sniffing the ground and the air around her, Q followed her nose in pursuit of the heavenly scent wafting through the air. Having exited the base and followed the scent back into town, she was still the size of a small horse and soon made it back into Shell Village, never noticing the frightful looks people gave her as she walked through. Eventually, she came up to a small restaurant and trotted in before spotting what smelled so heavenly. It was a onigiri, rice ball, of all things, but the filling smelled like some kind of cooked rabbit. So intoxicated by the aroma, she all but floated over, scaring a man as she neared and slowly reached out to take a bite. "No!" screamed a little girl before hitting her with the broom, knocking the vixen out of her trance. "Ah!" the fox yelped before being smacked again. "Hey, quit it, you little brat!" The small brown-haired girl with her hair in two pigtails yelped and fell back, the broom clattering to the floor loudly as everyone backed away further than they already were, frightened not only because of the size but now it talked. "Why you talked?" she gasped out while pointing at the vixen. How can you?" Q grinned, a strange sight for the girl and the other surrounding villagers to see. "How? I ate a devil fruit, of course." "Really?" she exclaimed, her fear now forgotten. "What can you do? Besides talk?" "Well, I can change my size and get a lot stronger and faster, but usually I just leave the fighting to my master, Vice Admiral Naruto, you know, that blonde man wearing a white suit and the big white coat that you yelled at a while ago." It didn't take too long for the entire village to know that the newest arrival was in fact a Vice Admiral of the Marines. Not only that, but a well-known and feared one at that. Vice Admiral Naruto Uzumaki, praised by many for taking down the pirate king Gol D. Roger at the young age of 16 and feared by pirates due to his unofficial status as a marine pirate hunter. "Woo, it's a good thing we got out of there, Hazoro!" Luffy laughed while he and his new first mate readied the boat to leave. Zoro was a slightly taller and older teen than Luffy, wearing a white shirt, dark pants with matching boots, and a green waistband holding his 3 swords. "No kidding," he grumbled. "We just got out of trouble with Morgan, and we don't need to run into a vice admiral of all things." Spotting a marine ship a few docks over, the swordsman grimaced. "Let's just hurry up and get out of here." He spoke while both got into the boat and got ready, leaving the rope tying the boat to the dock as the only thing left to take care of. "Oh?" spoke a voice. "Leaving so soon?" Turning, both rookie pirates saw the last thing they ever wanted to see. Sitting on a 2-foot-tall metal stool-looking thing on the dock close by where they tied the mooring line, or the line used to keep the boats from drifting away, was a blond man with blue eyes and 3 scars on each of his cheeks, wearing a white suit and a marine greatcoat. Zoro slowly reached for one of his swords, ready to fight at a moment's notice. Naruto noticed this and waved it off. "Calm down, I'm not going to fight you. We interrogated the Marines stationed here, and as it turns out, Morgan framed the previous captain and took over using force. He's ruled this island like a tyrant and killed any that opposed him, and you very well may have saved many lives today." He stood up and took the mooring line in his hand, unwrapping the news from the stool and tossing it into the boat with him. "But listen here, Monkey D. Luffy, you should listen to your grandfather and stop this pirate business." Luffy blinked. "How do you know my name?" Naruto smirked. "Another time, but I'm serious. We no longer owe you anything. If you're still a pirate, next time I find you I probably won't be so nice. Oh, and one last thing, your little friend Kobe sends his regards. He wanted to see you off, but he's a little busy at the moment getting fitted for his new uniform." The rubber teen broke out into a large grin. "So he made it into the Marines?" Naruto shook his head. "He's not ready to officially join yet, but he will be," he informed the younger man before turning and walking away. "Good luck, kid. Next time I see you, you'll probably need it." 2.5 months later. Standing on the deck of Naruto's ship, Tashigi sighed and looked around only to find herself along near the bow, close to where the blonde would always sit in his lawn chair when he wasn't doing anything. "What's taking so long, Naruto-kun?" she whispered to herself before walking over to the lawn chair. "You should be back already." After the ordeal on Shell Island, they had stayed for another week until everything was back to normal, and some extra Marines arrived after being reassigned to the base and placed under Captain Irika's command, who had been cleared of all charges thanks to evidence they uncovered in Morgan's files. But soon after that, they found themselves heading back to Marineford and put on reserve until further notice by Naruto himself. When she asked why, he didn't give her a straight answer, just saying that he would be gone for a while and would be taking Q with him. Although, he did tell her that the trip wouldn't take more than a month or 2, but those 2 months were up and he'd yet to return. She just knew that he was okay. After all, you see someone take cannonballs to the head thrown by Vice Admiral Garp of all people, and you start thinking that they're indestructible. But she couldn't help but feel bad and wonder what he was doing. Not much was known about the mysterious Dr. Vegapunk, the world's leading scientist in the study of seastone and various other areas. Even most of the Marines had never laid eyes on this person before. "Are we done yet, old man?" Naruto huffed while kneeling down on one knee, sweat rolling down his face and neck, causing the tank top he was wearing to stick to his body. "I've been doing this for hours. Don't you have enough data by now?" Vegapunk, an elderly old man wearing a long lab coat over a striped shirt with long yellow gloves on his hands and goggles over his eyes, looked up before smiling. "I guess so," he mused before rubbing his gloved hand over his wild white hair. "Sorry about that, it's just that I've never dreamed of seeing such a marvelous devil fruit in action." Naruto thought back. Not long after leaving Shell Island, Q presented him with a small locked chest, which to his shock, contained one of the treasures of the sea, a legendary devil fruit. After a lot of arguing between the two, she finally talked him into eating it, but before he did, he came to Vegapunk to find out just what it could do to him, not wanting to eat it, and end up accidentally killing someone when he tried to find out what it did on his own. After days of testing, the doctor informed him that it was a paramecia, one of the more common types of devil fruit, yet was rarer than most at the same time. Paramecia types could give the consumer superhuman physical abilities or powers, while others could alter features of their bodies or their environment, Lastly, there were some that allowed the user to manipulate and generate some kinds of substances. But this one was different, and he found that out the hard way. The doctor had him stay in a secure area and eat the fruit, which tasted horrible, and after choking it all down with tears nearly streaming down his face, he passed out and woke up feeling strange. As it turns out, he ate a legendary devil fruit known as the storm fruit, giving him power over storms, as the name implied. By Vegapunk's calculations, or maybe just an intelligent guess, he'd be able to not only generate storms but manipulate things like water, wind, and lightning as well. That is if he practiced. So for the next 2 months, he trained while the doctor studied him like a lab rat, asking him to use some of his attacks repeatedly for him to take notes. He soon found out that his wind and lightning powers were much stronger than his water, due to the sea water's effects on users such as him, but he could still manipulate it, only not as well as the others, although it seemed to work on fresh water just work fine. Maybe due to the lack of salt in fresh water? "I'll see you some other time, Doc," he told the elderly scientist. "I've been gone long enough, I gotta go back to my crew and get back to work." Vegapunk waved distractedly, going over the thick stack of notes he'd taken. "See ya later, kid," before walking off and leaving the blonde to show himself out. Chapter end.